Welcome back to another episode of the Aquademia podcast. I'm your host, Maddie Cassidy.
And I'm Justin Grant.
And today we are covering a topic that I personally am really interested in. We're going to be talking all about living wages with Lisa van Wageningen, the Program Manager Aquaculture of IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative. So before we get into all of that, be sure to subscribe to Aquademia wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you enjoy this episode, leave us a rating or review.
Follow us on X at Aquademia Pod. If you want to contact the podcast for any reason, you can do so with our online forum, which is located at globalseafood.org/podcast.
And now let's get into our interview with Lisa.
Welcome to the Aquademia podcast.
Our diet is hurting the environment in myriad ways. I mean, we desperately need to eat more seafood.
This is a pioneering industry with a whole lot of people who have really good ideas and a lot of experience and are unafraid.
Aquademia is your go-to podcast for a fresh take on all things seafood.
Lisa, thank you so much for joining Maddie and I on the Aquademia podcast. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
We're doing well.
Good. Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, we're glad that we were able to pull this off. Amy McGann connected us and said this would be a wonderful topic to talk about, the IDH Living Wage Roadmap. So we're really excited to delve into some of these questions that we have listed. But before we get into that, could we have you, Lisa, introduce yourself, maybe a brief background, as well as a short introduction to the IDH Living Wage Roadmap?
Yeah, happy to do so. So my name is Lisa van Wageningen and I lead the aquaculture program at IDH. IDH is a global foundation with headquarters in the Netherlands, and we are really there to support the private sector in meeting their sustainable development goals. So we always work with the private sector so that they can address critical issues in their supply chains. We have our headquarters in the Netherlands, but we are global, so we are in all different countries. And we work in a lot of sectors, so typically in commodities that are produced in the south of the world and consumed in the north. So think of cotton, but also fruits and vegetables and tea. And in one of those sectors, it was mainly in tea and in the banana sector, at one point the living wage as a topic came up. And I'll explain more about it. But the nice thing about working across commodities is that you can somehow pick up other themes and then ask yourself the question, can't you also do something on that theme in a different sector? And that was also what happened a bit in aquaculture. So we learned a lot in bananas and tea. And then we also created tools that and this roadmap that then became sector agnostic. So, and that's where it all started in those sectors. And my background is in something completely different, so in international relations and in religion studies. But somehow I ended up, because of my international development studies, I studied in a university that is also linked to my name, Wageningen, and they were focused on agriculture. And I did my thesis around shrimp farming, and I never got out of it. But
That's what happens.
Yeah. But it's also because I like it a lot. And what I also like a lot about shrimp farmers and shrimp companies is that they're often very entrepreneurial and are not afraid to change things too. And especially also on living wage, right? It's not a super conservative sector. And I think aquaculture in general, it's a nice, I like the people a lot, and there's a lot of movement. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Yeah, that's one thing that Justin and I have always loved about working in the aquaculture space is that it's such an innovative space. There's always new things happening and everybody's excited to be trying new things. It's really refreshing to be in an industry that's like excited about change.
Yeah, definitely. It makes your day-to-day work so much more pleasant.
Yes.
Because you often also work with people that want to change. Instead of, you also do have sectors that are very conservative and want to just keep things as they are.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
anyway,
We also run into a lot of individuals who, through one choice or another, found their way into aquaculture
yeah,
and then never left. And it's
Yeah.
like once it gets a hold of you, you're in there, and
Yeah.
everyone always enjoys it. But we've met multiple people through the podcast, through events, things that we've been at, where they're like, I don't know how I ended up here, but I love it, and I've been here for decades.
yeah, and I do have the luxury to work in an organization where, on the one hand, I have my one foot in the pond, but my other, I can learn from other sectors, but also take some of the things that we learn in aquaculture and apply them to other sectors, right? So
Yes.
you also often, if you remain within your silo, you might keep reinventing a wheel that has already been invented. So we also don't need to do everything from scratch. We
Right.
can learn from others.
Yep.
So when was this work happening, particularly with bananas and tea, and when did IDH start working with the aquaculture industry?
Yeah, so we always had an aquaculture program. So that was already in 2011, I think we started. And then it was really focused around certification. But later on, as sustainability also changed, the topics also changed. And that, I think it was around the 2015s, we had a big program around tea in Malawi, so in the country in Africa, where a lot of the buyers realized that they did not have, that the workers weren't earning enough to have a decent life. So then they tried to, at country level, get all the buyers and the producers together to work on this one topic. So that is where that happened on the one hand. On the other hand, it was around the same time where also in the banana industry, I'm not sure, and that's something I would need to double check. But it was around that time where also, and it also came from retailers, where they also saw really a risk in having or they saw that there was a risk for workers not having living wages in the banana sector, and it came up and up again, right? And you always have, I'm not sure in bananas if this was driven by more advocacy NGOs, but it was a topic that popped up. And then at one point we brought the two things together and created something that could work for any commodity.
Just in case we have some listeners that are wondering why this is important to be talking about, I want to go back to the basics. So could you just define living wage, maybe talk about why it's important, and then we'll kind of move into the question of why would a company want to pay a living wage? What is the business case for it?
Yeah. So earning a living wage, it means that an adult wage earner, they earn enough to contribute to a basic cost of living for them and their family. So it's that you earn enough so that you have a decent standard of living. So it basically looks at the cost of living in a particular area or region, which includes food, water, housing, education, healthcare, transportation, clothing, and other essential needs.
Right.
Such as, for example, that you can go to an unexpected event, such as a funeral of a family member. It's decency. So it's not about luxury. It's about being able to have enough, a regular food, a diet that a regular family eats. So, and it's also in terms of clothing, it's like 2 pairs of shoes, right? It's not a luxury.
Mm-hmm.
So, and those estimates, so it's cost of living relative to a particular area. And those estimates are calculated by independent and reputable sources. So it's researchers then understanding what the cost of living are. I once checked it also for the city where I lived in, and it also had it included housing, right? So I then realized, okay, I'm above a living wage, but you can even look it up for the place where you live. But it's sort of a minimum that you need to earn in order to have a decent life. And it's different from a minimum wage. A minimum wage is often specific to a sector, and it's also set by a government. But a living wage is really, in a particular region, what cost do you have?
Wow, that was a really good description. So looking at this, why would a company want to pay a living wage?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a human right. So, and you would hope that would be enough.
Right.
But anyway, there is also a business case, I think. And that is, on the one hand, that it's good for your reputation. And on the other hand, that it also helps you in meeting security of your supply. But to put it very basic, it's if you have happy staff, they tend to work also harder than unhappy staff. But also higher pay tends to lead to fewer strikes, especially in factories, lower turnover rates. So you won't have people that you need to then again introduce to the job, and higher productivity. So, and at the same time, it's also a mitigator of various global challenges such as child labor, forced labor, inequality. If you are more of a business opportunity kind of person, you could say, well, it helps you also in enhancing your brand value and stronger reputation, but it also secures customer loyalty. It will attract new customers, maybe. It might also increase your market share, or you might receive more favorable financing terms from investors. So more and more investors are also asking about it. And in terms of your supply security, so it helps you reducing turnover and business costs, and it improves productivity and quality specification. And if you are more a person driven by risks, which is okay as well, right? There's limited controversy and negative publicity if you work on it. You have less consumers that are boycotting your company, and you have less destabilized supply chains that will undermine the quality and delivery, and also less. You will have low return on sustainability investments. So those are, from a business perspective, I think, why it will help you. And for example, we have been working on a different project, and it wasn't around living wage, but it was around multi-company collective bargaining agreements in Vietnam. But you have in the shrimp sector, you have a lot of, also at factory level, right, women that are peeling the shrimp. And there you saw that a lot of women moved from one company to the other. And that was also pretty costly if you, by the time when you have a peak and you have all those shrimp coming in and you need a workforce to then rely on others that you need to pay higher because you need to get them from another area and train them, etc. So those strikes in some contexts might really be a negative cost to a company.
I'm really interested in what you were saying about how a living wage is calculated. So you mentioned that there are third-party researchers who will do an in-depth analysis of how you can actually calculate what a living wage is. But would you mind just going into that a little bit more? So you mentioned those factors of like shoes and housing and food and clothing, those necessities. So is a living wage calculated based off of that list of variables that you mentioned?
Yeah. So it's that variables, but applicable to a local context. So first you calculate what those costs of living are for food, and that's then a typical a basket in a supermarket, so to say, for that region, right? If you are in Italy, it might include spaghetti, and in the Netherlands, it might include potatoes, to put it, but like a typical food, but also water and housing. So they will look at rents or at or mortgage, education and healthcare, and also transportation. So if a worker needs to go to the factory, how much does that cost? And clothing and other essential needs, and that's specific to that local context. But then if you add all those costs up, it's also divided by a typical family. And that might be that in some contexts you will have like a family of 5 children, and in another context it's like 2 children. And it also might be that in one context you have more work earners than in another. So where you have a couple, it's normal that some of the two works part-time, or where it's normal where you have two full-time functions. So it's all relative to that local context.
And how specific are those local contexts decided? Like, is it on a city by city basis, a region by region? Because it definitely can't just be country by country, because things can vary so much within just one country.
Yeah, of course. So you have different levels of living wage benchmarks. So that living wage benchmark is that average cost divided by then the adult wage earners. But you have them at different levels. Sometimes you only, because also imagine how much research needs to go into this. Sometimes you would only have them at country level, but it can also be as specific and going at city level. For example, in Vietnam, you also have it per region, but you would also have a separation between city and rural. We also, on our website, we have a tool where you can find all those living wage benchmarks. And it depends also per country how specific they are. And we also say the more specific, the better, right? Because as you said, you will have huge differences.
That's great. We'll be sure to link to that tool in the show notes, because I think people could have a lot of fun looking at that.
You did a really good job, Lisa, kind of painting that picture. What is the business sense? There's a lot of positive benefits to supporting your workers and giving them a livable wage. I'm going to turn the table a little bit and talk about the challenges. What sort of challenges do companies face as they're working towards paying a living wage?
Yeah. Well, as you can imagine, you need a lot of trust between supply chain to disclose that information. So typically we see that this goes better when there is longer relationships between, for example, a retailer or a buyer and some of their suppliers, because you need to trust your the person you sell the let's say shrimp to, that they will treat the information that you provide them well, right? So that disclosing information that requires trust. So that's one. Another challenge is that it takes some time to explain also, and to also gain buy-in from producers or from suppliers. And another challenge is around shared supply chain. So imagine that you have a banana plantation in, let's say, Nicaragua, and you are a retailer from the US buying from that plantation, and you want to pay a living wage, but maybe a retailer in Europe does not want to. Then you could add up the amount so that the wage workers gain a living wage. But if all the other retailers don't do it, then the workers don't end up with a living wage, because it's only for the proportion that you buy, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to sort of do it together, and also imagine if you are a producer that you have all these different buyers asking for all these different specifics, and it just also takes time to calculate it and to double check. That's why also getting ahead already a little bit, but it's good to really do this together and to see if you can get enough market share as a producer, but also as a retailer, that you have enough producers to really make a difference. And of course, there's also, it really depends on the sector also how much it takes to sustain a higher wage, right? And there are sectors where the margins are very low, where you have poor procurement practices, for example, where when a product is sold, people only tend to gain their money like 3 months later. They're almost like a bank, and it's very difficult to then pay your workers in time. But also where there's a lack of market transparency or low facility productivity. So those are all things that could be a burden, and it really depends on the sector and on the country whether there is we call that a living wage gap. So the difference between a living wage and what workers are earning, and sometimes it can be very limited, and then there's only a small thing you can do and you're already there. And sometimes the situations are just very complex and difficult.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that makes me wonder. So if a company, so say someone listening to this podcast this is their first introduction to a living wage.
Yeah.
How would they, as a company owner or someone who's operating this company, how could they go about starting to pay a living wage or like working towards paying a living wage?
Yeah, so it might be a long process, right? So it's also not something you do overnight. So it takes some commitment. But first, build an understanding about the topic and why it is relevant. So have conversations internally, learn from companies that have already done so. And again, on our website, we have lots of examples of companies that have taken this route. And then understand what that living wage benchmark is, so that the cost of living in the area where you potentially buy from, or where a factory is, or where a farm is. And after you have done that, so first understand what that benchmark is, you have to compare that benchmark towards what the workers are earning. And on the one hand, you have wages, but on the other hand, as a company might also provide bonuses or in-kind benefits. So imagine that to the factory, you would have a bus going from the village there, and that reduces the cost that a worker needs to pay for. Or if there's lunch, then that person does not need to eat, right? So we also created a tool on our which is also freely accessible, where you can then double check whether for each job category, so each worker also, do they meet this living wage or not? Because it can become pretty complicated very soon. Also, if you have part-time staff or long-term or full-time. But this tool will, if you have like if the paperwork is on order and the HR department is working, then this will help you in seeing whether there is this living wage gap, so this difference between the living wage and what workers are and current remuneration. And then also who has this gap. It might be that the cleaning lady has a huge gap, whereas the for example, the women peeling the shrimp don't have a gap at all, right? So it just provides you insights in how big that gap is for what person. So first step, understand what the benchmark is. Second, understand what the status quo is. So what the current remuneration is in comparison to that living wage. And the third step is also if you do this for a customer and you want to not do this as a self-assessment only, but have another verification, you could reach out to an auditor to double check whether the living wage is correct or not. And then it's all about reducing it, right? But in order to do so, so reducing the living wage gap, the difference between current remuneration and the living wage, and that requires another understanding of what the reason is. So that might be because of those procurement terms. Maybe you need more, or you need longer term contracts, and maybe you don't need anything at all, and you can use this for your clients and show them that the living wage is being paid. And as a last step, that's on our roadmap, so we have those 5 steps. You could then share your lessons to other companies that want to engage in the same journey.
We talked about this and how important it is for that collaborative approach.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things that we're talking about that to some who are interested and want to learn more, there could be that hesitation of, whoa, this kind of sounds complicated. There's a lot of different things to consider. But you mentioned a lot of industries have already tackled this, so we can learn from how they're doing it and kind of potentially simplify the process. Yeah. So I want to talk about that collaborative approach. So with retailers and producers, kind of closing that living wage gap. So from those pilots that you discussed in other industries, could you elaborate a little bit more on what those best practices that you've seen that could be applied to the seafood sector?
Yeah. So on the one hand, we had retailers that got together And that said, then that is both in the Netherlands, Belgium, in the UK, and we also collaborated for a retail commitment in Germany. But and this was around bananas. But they got together and they committed towards reducing a gap. So that commitment itself, so setting a public commitment and a target, helped to increase trust towards the producers. So it was really helpful that retailers said, we commit to reducing it, and we also want to play our part. So because in the end, it's also that the entire supply chain needs to do this together, right? That maybe there's a reason why a producer cannot pay their workers. Again, it might have to do with those payment terms or what have you. So doing this, so having that public commitment, that helped for bananas. There are already those tools and guidance that is available, right? So don't start from scratch.
Yeah.
And I think what we also learned is that market leverage is crucial. So you can of course do this on your own, but it's so much easier if you do it together. So I think what I would recommend also, if a company wants to start working and they first have that conversation with your supplier to build that trust, right? To say that you're interested, that you're not only interested in knowing whether they are paying a living wage or not, but that you're also committed to support them in finding ways how to reduce a gap if there is any. And that of course then people will expect you to talk about price, but it might also be done in a different way. It might also be leveraging then other retailers or other buyers to do it together, or to together see if with a local embassy a conversation can be started with the government around minimum wages, or maybe it can be by having a conversation with potentially a trade union that might be in country that might already have solutions or ideas. So I would first start having that honest conversation and say that you are committed to support that supplier in reducing, and then also tell the supplier that you are interested in doing this with other buyers. So are there others that have asked you to do so that we reduce the burden for you, that you don't need to have like 10 different methods, but we do it all together and we share that burden.
Yeah, that's a really great approach, because when I think about the seafood, specifically with the seafood industry, the seafood supply chain is one of the world's most complex supply chains. And that adds, because everything is such a domino effect with pricing, it seems like it would be really hard if you're the only one that's trying to work towards this. So it makes a lot of sense. Like a collective effort is going to be much more fruitful than trying to do it all on your own.
Yeah, and you could, for example, or maybe you have a good relationship with your competitors and you meet in Boston, or you meet in I don't know, in another multi-stakeholder initiative, or you're all part of the seafood task force in Thailand, and you know that you are with a few buyers in that same area. You could do it collectively and for one particular area to start from. And I would really encourage everyone to do it together and not alone. And also reach out to maybe organizations, NGOs that can support you on this journey. We are always open to work on living wages, so that's that always helps. But we, for example, also we try to better understand it within aquaculture, and we also then started with 3 countries and engaged with a few producers there was in Ecuador and in India and in Vietnam. We aren't done yet, but where we at least had 3 countries and then multiple producers and a few buyers to just get started and understand, without having any commitment yet on reducing it, but to just understand how big the gaps are. Maybe they aren't that big, right? So we shouldn't bother, but maybe they are, and understanding where they're big and where they're not already helps in tackling an approach that is efficient in terms of resources.
Could you elaborate more on what's next? What's beyond what has already been done?
Yeah. So, well, on the one hand, so it's a long-term process, right? But if you are interested in living wage, please also reach out to me and we can discuss if we can set something up. And for now, I don't have a target for 2030 yet on living wage, but with anyone interested, I would like to see if we can get something done. It is also it will become more and more important, the topic, also because of stricter due diligence and human rights regulation. And
Yep.
So I don't know, maybe it's also something we can do together with Global Seafood Alliance or with BAP. But if we could find a group of companies that is interested to better understand, and maybe starting from one location, I would first like to don't try to do everything at once, but maybe one location can be identified where a few companies can get together and make this work. And I think there are ample organizations also, such as the Global Seafood Alliance, that would happily also facilitate those companies coming together. But I'm not speaking for them. But
if any of our listeners are interested in contacting you, wanting to learn more, what is the best way that they could do that?
Yeah. So we have our website on the IDH Living Wage Roadmap. Okay. You'll find lots of resources, information, also from companies in other sectors that have worked on it, and that also, by the way, have proven that it doesn't necessarily need to lead to a very high price increase. So we have companies in it's in apparel, but also in fruits, and in the telephone, also a telephone brand that have worked on it, and it wasn't. It depends a bit, but the highest price increase was, I think, 5%. So
wow,
it's
not as much as I would have guessed.
That you would think, eh?
Yeah.
So there are ways, and some of those, even the business, like the metrics behind it, are on our website, so you can check there. And there you also see my colleagues that are working on living wage specifically. You can also reach out to me personally. You'll find my name on my website and my email address. You can even spell it out here. But,
Maddie
we'll
mentioned it earlier, but we'll put all of these links that you're mentioning right in our show notes, so it'll be easily accessible by anyone that checks those out.
Yeah.
I know that we just mentioned that increase of 5%, which, to your point, Maddie, I would have guessed maybe there would have been a larger gap there. But even on top of that, the things that you mentioned early on in this conversation, Lisa, about the benefits, the business case for doing this, right? It costs companies a lot of money to replace employees. So if employees are not happy and they don't feel like they're being treated fairly, whatever it is, there's a lot of costs associated with that, which sometimes can be hard to figure out. But to retain happy employees, that makes sense both at a humane level, but also from a business case.
Yeah.
So before we let you go, while you have this platform, is there anything else that you want to discuss, talk about while you have the mic?
Let me think. I think it's just worth having. I like my job, and I really hope that people are fulfilled by what they do, right? Or that they, and that it enables them to just have a decent life, because that's what it's about, being able to prepare a meal for your kid, right? It's, imagine that you don't even have the resources to do so. I would be so unhappy and not really keen to continue working where I am. So I think we should recognize the people that are making our food and make sure that they can enjoy their food as much as we do the food that they help putting on our plates. Yeah.
That's well said.
That's a great closing message.
Well, we'll do our part in spreading all of this information to all of our listeners. This is a very important topic. Like you said, it's not something that you can tackle in a very short amount of time. No. So any businesses, companies that are interested in learning more, there's a lot of resources that you mentioned that we'll make sure, again, to link in those show notes. Lisa, thanks again for taking the time to walk our listeners through the IDH Living Wage Roadmap. We really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you so much.
folks, that was our interview with Lisa von Wageningen from IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative. Huge thank you to Lisa for joining us for this episode.
Yeah, I was glad to get Lisa on the podcast. She went into great detail on a lot of different aspects as far as living wages. So without further ado, remember, you can find Aquademia on X at Aquademia Pod. You can also contact us with our online form, which is located at globalseafood.org/podcast.
And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave us a rating or review on whichever podcast platform you listen to us on.
Ciao.
Bye.